In this chapter, we want to look at the arrangement we can do with synthesizers. And basically, it's about the preparations and a bit about the general ideas, how you would approach a track, because there's so many different ways. Sometimes you just start with the drums, sometimes you get inspired working with the synthesizer and you generate a sequence or whatever, or you capture a sound outside and start to loop it and start to mangle it. And there are so many different ways to actually get the creative process going. And we, in this case, want to focus on one particular one, and that is the synthesizer. And right now we're just laying the foundations for the actual recording that we're going to make, and this will be about the options that we have, the bandwidth of the sounds that we can create with this one element that we have prepared in the last chapter. And we have to just be aware that there's different ways to proceed from this point. Some people just like to do one wild jam with modulars or whatever synthesizers and then later chop it up and rearrange it and see what's coming out of it. Personally, I'm a little bit more of a purist, so it's not that every time when I start on a new track I would have the whole concept in mind already. This happens, but it's not always the case. Sometimes I'm just doing whatever I want to do step by step and let it develop without a clear picture of where I would want to bring it in the end. But typically, when I work with synthesizers, regardless of whether it's modular or normal regular synthesizers, I would have quite a precise idea of what I want to do before I start recording, which means I kind of have an idea of the whole rise and fall and the build of tension throughout the whole track, and I adjust my synth lines accordingly. And before we do that, we just have to get an idea of what's possible and what we can do with the sound. So when we get started, we will use the envelope to create different types of very broad, powerful bass lines, and then a very snappy, punchy one with a short release parameter. We will, of course, explore the filters and play with the high pass and the low pass, and we might also switch through the octaves of the oscillators and introduce some noise and stuff like that, just to see how much we can tweak the basic sound that we're having right now, and how wide the spectrum is that we can actually use to make the modulation of the whole element throughout the track interesting, not just a static thing where you could loop one bar and yeah, that's the whole thing. I think it's very interesting to modulate the elements throughout the whole track, and I prefer to also record longer continuous pieces to give it some physicality in the whole process, to do something that might not as easily be replicated with the mouse on the screen. And before we take that step, we now have to have a look at the tonal palette, the sonic options that we can get from this 16th note bassline. I would say this is obvious. It's the low pass cutoff, probably the most used modulation when we work with synthesizers, and of course the fun really starts when we also introduce the high pass. Typical breakdown and drop move that you would filter out the low frequencies and then bring the bass back. So this, of course, is one thing. We can go from very snappy to a very drony, powerful bass line. We can switch octaves. In the oscillators. add some noise. We can of course play with our AM modulation. And lastly, we might just add a little bit of resonance to the filter. Yes, so this should be a good overview of the easily accessible modulations and variations with this still quite straightforward synth patch. And the next step should be to make sense of all these varieties over the course of a whole track.